Want to welcome everybody here today. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then have a moment of silence for Selma. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So everybody has the, and I'll keep it together, here. The sad news about Selma, who is a friend to so many of us and a champion of our community. So before Shani provides our invocation, I'd like us to have a moment of silence. All right, Shani.
Okay, bear with me. It is hard to put into words the loss that our community is feeling today. Selma Pierce was a servant leader in the truest form. She walked the Rotary motto, service above self. Selma was an example of kindness to us all. She modeled the inner strength of a giant, the quiet courage of a lion, yet she walked with grace and humility. Her smile was a dose of sunshine, and at the same time was a source of silent encouragement. Selma cared about all and served all deeply. The loss of Selma leaves a void that is vast and deep, yet truly immeasurable. I have no doubt, Selma, that you were met at heaven's gate with the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." My friends, we lost a gem last night, but we have all truly gained a guardian angel. I know that Selma would understand and be okay with our tears and our sadness. But I also know that Selma would expect us to continue doing our good works. Godspeed to our dear friend.
Thank you, Shani. All right. I don't see that we have any guests or visiting Rotarians today. Keeping up with the chat. So Ozzy, I'm going to hand it off to you.
It's a little bit difficult being a bell ringer a week after Selma was our bell ringer.
Yes.
But here we go. I'm ringing the bell again for Salem Rotary's Tree of Joy project. Thank you, club members, for your generous support to date. We have filled gifts requests for 60 Oregon State Hospital residents and are on the way to spreading Christmas joy to many underserved children in our community. Club members can still support our effort by making a tax-deductible donation, check or online to the Salem Rotary Foundation, or by purchasing a gift for a child of any age and ship it or deliver it to Don Bostwick at Huggins Insurance. Ring the bell for the Tree of Joy project. John McCulloch and Holly Berry are ringing the bell because it is very rare that the Beavers beat the Ducks in a football game, but that happened last Friday, and it is certainly worth a bell ringer. Ring the bell for the Beavers. Laura Flynn is ringing the bell for the volunteer kettles with the Salvation Army this season. As you know, the kettles are fewer and far between. Please do your best to help this program. Ring the bell for the volunteer kettles with the Salvation Army. And now, on a more serious note, David Suter is ringing the bell in recognition of Selma. He says, I was lucky enough to get to know her a bit over the last year, and she was a sweet and wonderful person who did a great deal for the Salem community. She will be missed greatly. Ring the bell for Selma. Allison Kelly has offered a triple bell ringer for Selma, but there are no other words with it. And the last one for today, I'll read it. As the Salem community mourns the tragic sudden loss of a fellow Rotarian, Selma Pierce, Linda Wooters offers a $100 bell ringer in her honor and memory. It's hard to think back just a week ago when Selma herself was serving Salem Rotary, leading the bell ringers. The Pierce family, the city of Salem, and all the individuals Salem's kind hand touched have lost an angel on earth, called home for reasons we cannot yet fathom. She also invites other members to join in this bell ringer. Please ring the bell for Selma.
So there are many, many, many of our fellow Rotarians in the chat room adding bell ringers. So how would you like to do that, Ozzy? The screen is moving rapidly.
I'm not sure. I'm not even sure I know how to use the chat. But I'm going to make a bell ringer, a $50 bell ringer, when I send in my first bell ringer for Selma. And I don't know how to identify the rest of the folks. I don't know exactly how you want to handle this.
Okay.
May-
So
Maybe we could send a list to me. If you've made a donation or a bell ringer, Selma, send me one and I will include it in, not this week, but next week's list of bell ringers.
okay. So what I'll do is I'll copy and paste later in the meeting from the chat room to capture the bell ringers.
Okay, and then I'll submit them for the e-blast thing.
Okay, that's great.
Thank
So
you.
I'll just, thank you, Ozzy. I'll just say, let me just go through this real quick. Tammy Denny's, and these are all for Selma. Tammy Denny, Jen Columbus, Claudia, Warren and Linda, Deb Patterson, Ryan, Alicia at Gilbert House, Kim Lemon, Farah, Brenna, Allison, Ozzy read Allison's, Justin, Teresa, Donna Teresa, Cindy Linasar, Christy Perry, Robin Kerner, Renee Campbell, and Brenda's put the link in. Lori Phelps, Ken Van Osdale, Tim Murphy, Don Bostwick, Ron Kellerman, Marilyn Schuster, Russ McCracken, Lauren Gutierrez, Tim Nissen, Steve Horning, Shani Starr, Pat Force, Vanessa Nordyke, Trisha Frizzell, Larry Connick. Thank you all so very much, as a lovely tribute to her. So, John, let's see, Holly Berry, we've got Diane McLaren, a couple more. Thank you all very much. John, we're actually really thrilled to have you here today, and very interested in your program. So I'm going to hand the program off to Past District Governor Renee to introduce you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So, Renee.
Thank you. This topic was actually very close to Selma's heart as well, and she served on the Community Homeless Connect as a volunteer. But over the past 3 years or so, we've had several programs related to homelessness, from causes to a variety of solutions. And our program today looks at an entrepreneurial approach that has several success stories in the Portland metro area. John McCulloch, through his foundation, attacks homelessness through affordable housing by adapting existing housing stock to create micro communities. He calls it the Sharewell model. John grew up next to Bush Park here in Salem, and his love of architecture grew from playing in and around those great houses in the area. His interest in the humanities and service came from his parents. His mother, as we talked about earlier, is a leading Northwest artist and activist, Sue Dell McCulloch. And his father, John, was a Salem City Councilor, Chief Trial Counsel for Oregon, Oregon's Solicitor General, and Oregon's Assistant Attorney General for 40 years. In Salem, he helped with running trails in Bush and Minto parks, saving buildings such as Deepwood and the Elsinore Theater, helping to expand playgrounds in some of our schools, fighting for Riverfront Park, and dozens of other civically minded causes. John Jr., with us here today, studied at the University of Oregon, Portland State University, Lewis and Clark, and the Art University of London. He taught at Portland State and a local high school while he was growing McCulloch Construction, Portland's most distinguished design build firm. He loved teaching humanities and PE, as well as coaching cross country and track. Now, with over 1,000 projects completed, including significant historic preservation and commercial remodeling projects, McCulloch Construction is best known for extreme high-end luxury housing. But through the McCulloch Foundation, he also works to help supply and build affordable housing. He's been among Portland's most active philanthropists, hosting numerous charity and nonprofit events in his personal historic home, and helping to raise over $30 million during the last 10 years. It was at one of those events that I met John. He's a fifth-generation Oregonian and strives to continue his family's deep tradition of public service. The McCulloch Foundation hopes to create a path for helping to defeat homelessness that will serve the community long into the future. Please help me welcome back to Salem, virtually, John McCulloch.
Great introduction. Thank you very much, Renee. I'm very nostalgic about Salem, of course, having grown up with you there. I bought my old childhood home there on Bush Park. And actually now Sean Hansen of the Union Gospel Mission lives there. And we take care of him so he can help your community. When I think about that house and mom and dad having that space full of civically minded friends who were all pushing to do great things. And it just was such an exciting place. 5 kids and then all of these community people trying to do different things together. And when you think of things like the 75 years that it probably took to get that waterfront park up and running, you think about the amazing work and our pride as a community as we got that downtown together. I remember Dad meeting with Al Nordstrom and trying to get him to put in Nordstrom's Mall and trying to save the Reed Opera House with others and so on. All of these efforts, of course, required hundreds, if not thousands of people. But all of those things that have to do with our civic pride all relate to parks in the downtown, or mostly. And you think about how right now with our homeless crisis, those parks and that downtown are becoming a source of shame because they are a failure of imagination and a failure of leadership, and we just haven't figured out how to solve the problem. So we've got to figure out how to tap into our empathy and our leadership and solve it. I attended a mayor's summit on homelessness that had mayors from Salem and Portland and Eugene, as well as Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco. And they all talked about different things they were doing with soup kitchens and all different kinds of measures they were taking. And the moderator was Dave Miller from OPB. And he said, so you guys have been studying this for decades now, for 3 decades, and you've spent tens of millions of dollars solving the homeless problem, studying it. What are the takeaways? And the mayors got together and conferred and said, you know, we need to commission a study. and the moderator said, that's it? You don't have, that's all you have? Nothing? And then that was just the end of the interview. So I called him afterwards and said, that's a strange kind of radio show that just ends with dead air and a dead end. And he said, yeah, I didn't know what to say. They didn't have any suggestions. So we're not alone in knowing this is a terribly tough problem. Now, I want to tell you a story of 2 powerful women I got to meet with that helped put me onto a good direction with this. So one is, I got to meet with, spend a day with Chris Gregoire, former governor of Washington. And she said, you know, when you're in the governor's mansion, it's all politics all the time. You're fundraising, and there are all kinds of political machinations from inside and outside of your party trying to take away your power. And the only way to get things done for her was to meet with entrepreneurs and business leaders, people who had the resources and the know-how to get things done. So that was her insight. Get with the business community. Okay. Then the second woman, I got to have dinner with Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is perhaps the most famous presidential biographer alive today. And she's the one who did the book Team of Rivals that was the recent Lincoln movie. And she was telling me how history judges us by the greatest issues of our time and place. And so clearly for Salem, our greatest issue is the affordability crisis and the homeless emergency. These are the issues of our time and place. And so for that one, of course, I happen to have some good tools. If the problem is housing, I've got a big construction company with all of those tools and high-powered estimating software and things like that that can be of use. Okay, now, how are we fighting homelessness? What are we doing? What is Salem doing? You think about car camping and cleanups, police sweeps, the emergency room. I've got friends who are doctors who are deliberately working in the ER so that they can help homeless people. There are soup kitchens, clean clothes, emergency beds. Portlanders raised 15 million to build the new Union Gospel that will supply beds for 20% of the downtown homeless. So that's great. So what am I forgetting in the in the houseless, what else do we need to do to combat houselessness? Well, we need houses. Rather evidently, that's at that is the center that we kind of forget sometimes. Everything else is emergency triage, and it's important, but it's just triage. So how do we get permanent housing? Well, the city of Portland is spending $100 million on building housing, and they're trying to pump out housing as fast as they can. So what are we doing up in Portland? We're building projects, big mega houses as fast as we can, that where we stick in people who have nothing in common, except that they were homeless or in danger of being homeless. And the projects don't work. Chicago just tore down all of their big projects from the 60s a couple of years ago. That is ultimately the fate of projects. And why is that? Because if you concentrate enough poverty in one place, and there are people with nothing in common except poverty, you've got a tremendous magnet for vice and crime. And then the people living in that mega housing experience, of course, isolation because they don't have anything in common with their neighbors. So what do we do to defeat homelessness? Well, we get them houses. And the most affordable housing, of course, already exists. It's a huge temptation, and you'll hear this in Salem more and more as the years go on. Politicians will want to build lots of big new housing projects because it's very exciting to spend millions of dollars on a huge project. But for our families and us as individuals, we live in used houses because they're cheaper than new houses unless you're very wealthy. If we're going to solve the housing problem, we find housing that's already in existence. Okay, so my plan is plain, practical, and proven, very simple. We locate houses and buy them that are good deals relative to the market. We redesign and remodel those so we can put 5 people in each house. So we add bathrooms and sometimes bedrooms. And then we locate groups that are micro communities who can live together and will have something in common to be in those spaces together. Then we build 2 communities. So we get the group that lives in the house to have meetings and work together to solve their common problems. And we also have an outside community that comes and visits with them and supports them and brings information to help with their specific challenges. And then finally, the 5th piece is that entrepreneurial piece where we make it an investment opportunity. So you think about housing in Salem, it's very possible to buy a 5-bedroom house for $300,000 in Salem today. Easy. So that means 5 people can live for $60,000 each, can have a piece of that house. But the way you make that even more affordable is you only use a down payment. So a 20% down payment, like we all have done when we bought houses, means $12,000 a person gives them a home, a room in a home. And compare that to what Portland's spending, which is $400,000 to $200,000 per bedroom to house people for affordable housing and homeless. So think of the burden on the taxpayer at $400,000 versus $12,000. You've got a 33 times the efficiency. So that's a big piece, is harnessing capitalism. Now, in Salem, Oregon today, we have $3,000 in retirement accounts for every $1 that anybody earns. So there's so much more money. We have trillions of dollars, of course, as a nation in retirement accounts. There is a huge amount of money in search of very few investment opportunities. So our rents, if we take that $60,000 a room cost, then that means as far as an investment, if you wanted to charge 5% for that money or give investors 5% back. That translates to a rental of $250 a month. Unheard of low. That's a price from 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Okay, then if you want to add 3% for management of the house to the foundation, that means that you've got 8% total. You've got an incredibly low rate of about $350 a month or something. That's what's possible. And then you've created this amazing investment opportunity for people where we know the stock market's way, way up and it's due to crash. It's overdue to crash, as is the general economy. So people who are retirement age need to find something that is a good, safe, conservative investment. So we put their name on the house. It's a real estate backed investment. It's nigh on recession proof. The worse the economy gets, the greater the demand for affordable housing. So that is the key to unlock this. And then it's the highest impact legacy investment for somebody. If they want to do something good with their money, suddenly they have this ethical high impact investing. Now, no discussion of houselessness is complete without talking about income disparity. When I go to these various summits on homelessness, people talk about, isn't it terrible how with this concentration of wealth, it creates homelessness? It does, but that's also the key to solving the problem. Yes, every time Salem gets richer, more people fall into homelessness because all the prices go up. Obviously, every time another person buys a Mercedes in Salem, your mechanics get in the habit of charging more money to fix cars. And if you're at the very bottom rung, the price just went up. We've all seen it. The housing, I bought a house in Salem 7 years ago that has doubled in value in 7 years. So as that's going up, more and more people are falling into homelessness rapidly. So we just make the cause of that problem, income disparity, into the solution. Just like with a vaccine, you make the cause of the disease into the cure. We make it the solution by offering the investment. Now, right now, downtown, you have 700 homeless people in downtown Salem. It's an estimate. Okay, so that means, and right now, Salem is spending $5 million per year on dealing with homeless in one way or another. So that means that we would have the down payment money needed to house all 700 people is about 8.6 million. You're spending 5 million already, so in 2 years of what you're spending right now, you've got enough to house permanently every single homeless person in Salem. That's how the math works. And it's infinitely scalable because it is something where the more affordable housing you produce, it eases the pressure on not just homelessness, but all the people who are vulnerable. And then you're going upstream. If you get people after they've been on the street, they all have traumatic stress disorder at some point if they're on the street long enough. If you can catch them, first of all, that's huge. Okay, another aspect of this is disaggregating the problem. So when we talk to people who are kind of defeatist about homelessness, they'll say, look, these are kids who choose this way of life, and they're military who have post-traumatic stress from serving overseas. They are elderly people who are terminally ill. Well, they lump every problem that ever was part of mankind's burden into the homeless and then say it's insoluble. Yeah, that person never existed who had all of those things. So you disaggregate it by having one group that is for single mothers, one home, and one home that's for widows, and one home that's for another group, and so on. And so you break down that problem into groups that can help each other succeed And that's a huge piece of this. Okay, what group will you help? What group do you want to help? So you start with the easy lifts. Now, I went to the city of Portland and offered to help, and they said they would like me to not just provide housing for homeless, but if I could provide home ownership to homeless and make sure we don't discriminate by making that home ownership available immediately in every neighborhood in Portland. Okay, well, that's a very heavy lift. So how do we make it a more practical program? Is you start with affordability first, and that means fewer people adding. You know, you had a 20% spike in homeless population in 1 year. Affordable housing will stop that problem from growing as fast. When you think about, you know, an interesting thing is a place like Appalachia has no homeless. You only have homeless people in cities with affluence. Just kind of an interesting, I'm sure you know that. Okay, now the houses that we started with girls who had aged out of foster care, a relatively easy group to take care of. And then we coupled them with an external community of women business leaders who were very successful, who could teach them about ladders to success. Now remember, this is not a handout, but a hand up. We are charging rent so that we're not creating a dependent population. We're creating a population that learns how to help themselves. Another group that we're doing right now, I met with the head of housing for Oregon and said, look, where could we do the most good? And the least affordable spot in Oregon is Lake Oswego. And the population that's the hardest hit in Lake Oswego is single mothers. So we're starting 2 single mothers' houses in Lake Oswego, and those kids will have a chance to attend the very best school in Oregon by SAT as far as public schools. And then a group of my parents' good friends, the Beatons, you may know Russ Beaton and Alana. So they did a house on this model where Russ is an award-winning economist, you know, one of the sharpest economists in Salem, surely. And he put his own life savings into this hood house. And he's getting a return on the investment where instead of spending his nest egg as he's required to do with his 401k or whatever he had, he now is not spending down the principal. He's put the principal in the house, self-directed Roth, and he is able to generate rent and do a good deed. And then Alana Beaton has this background as a social worker, and she is meeting with these women who are retirement age, former homeless people, and meeting with them regularly, fixing them dinners, having coffee with them. So she's part of that outside community. And then she's brought in some of her own network to meet with them and support them. So they have an ear to listen to, and again, somebody from the community to help. And you could imagine businesses, local businesses could adopt these houses. So you have the K&L Sharewell home for widows or something. Sharewell can prevent homelessness, catching it upstream. It means hope for all those on the street. It is stigma-free. They're living in normal neighborhoods like anybody else, not in a big project. It is more effective dollar for dollar than anything else we're doing. It's a proven formula. I've made it work. I've put in millions of my own dollars to make this thing work and prove it. So it's not just one more guy with an opinion. It's somebody else with skin in the game who's seen it work. And then your club is focused on this. This is already your main issue. And so, you know, because it is the biggest issue of our time and place. And so you're on the right track, and hopefully this will be the right solution. Now, if you can help connect us with people who have a good financial background, who understand investments and so on, if you have the heart to help and the business acumen to help make this functional and viable to get results. We're looking for a champion or two in Salem so we can help you get launched there. And please let Renee know how she can put us together, how you can contact me, and we're glad to help. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. We have some time for questions, and I will watch the chat, and Jessica will help us with watching raised hands. So if someone has a question for John, let us know and we'll get rolling. It was exciting. I've known Delana for years and years through service work. And so that was just delightful to hear how she's a part of what you're accomplishing. So I've got to touch base with her and learn more about that. So that's fascinating.
She gets all the credit. They put in their own money and their own time, and they're just working so hard at it. Yeah,
they are fantastic people. Vanessa Nordyke has her hand raised. Oh, and then Cindy, I'll call on you after. So Vanessa.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sue, and thank you, John. I would love to connect with you after the meeting.
Great. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I've heard good things about you being a big champion of this, so it's exciting.
Shucks. Little old me. Well, very good. I appreciate that. And I apologize. I've been working from home since March, so this is my COVID wardrobe. In any event, I do occasionally go out in public. It's been known to happen, but just not today. So first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. As a city councilor, I have been pushing for affordable housing to become one of the city's top priorities. I joined council a year ago, and I firmly believe in housing first, which is the evidence-based, data-driven model that works. And it is all about connecting persons with housing first, including affordable housing, especially affordable housing. After that, you can connect them with the stabilization services, case management services, et cetera. And I also dropped in the chat, in case people are curious what the city is currently doing, our Salem Housing Authority has a vast portfolio of affordable housing options and other programs that help put housing within reach of our hardest to house and those who are on fixed incomes. So I want to thank you for bringing your presentation here. And, one of my questions for you would be, you mentioned how sometimes it's not about having a big showy project. And believe me, I get that. I see opportunities for smart infill in places like Salem. We have little pockets of places that are undeveloped right alongside established neighborhoods. I'm kind of curious, how do you see affordable housing working for these little pockets of areas in addition to the big scale projects? And thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the idea of, with developers, they have so much wealth that they begin to bend the political landscape very quickly and also very subtly. I hear developer-backed initiatives suddenly get talked about as the only way to facilitate social justice and equality is to tear down houses in historic districts, for example, where you just know it has nothing to do with helping underprivileged or disadvantaged people, but so that's the first thing to watch out for. So you've already got the best idea, which is if developers are forced to make the next good neighborhood in places that are less developed, you can steer developers into doing social good. If you let them, you have to be super skeptical. The other thing is get people who understand estimating to evaluate whatever you're doing. With the city of Portland, time and time again, I watch us spend $400,000 a door to build things that are worth $50,000 a door. And it's contractors who are leaving with that money. And when I go to those requests for proposal, the contractors who are there are very angry at me right from the get-go, because they know they are having a feast of public dollars and the politicians don't have time to understand what that costs. So you've got to get people to do your due diligence, who are in the know, who can spot So make sure you're not paying too much.
All right, thank you. And then Cindy Linesar, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, John. Amazing idea. And I love the idea of the smaller cohorts living in houses that can be refurbished for that type of situation. I've been in this work for 20 plus years, and so I'm looking at this as a really great entrepreneurial type of thing, as well as smaller cohorts. But I know things that have failed in the past is investing in housing, and then it's not the house that costs the most, it's that support service. It's that ongoing connection. You mentioned the relationships that need to be created with those that have now been housed in those smaller units. Do you have any data on supportive services or that link to those relationships that also supports this as a viable option?
I've met with Multnomah County services providers, and one of the things that they told me right away is that we have a tremendous amount of overhead because we just have a very costly system put together, and it's kind of it's the same bugaboo of the PERS system and just the cost of operating government, where the first thing that the parallel organization in Portland to the Salem Housing Authority told me is, look, if you're going to work with us, you should know we get more vacation days than any state or any other organization. Like, that's the first thing out of their mouths. Like, this is going to be very expensive. So how do we make that work? Well, one of the huge things, and this is not so much data driven as just anecdotal, but the one thing that we do in Portland is we tell people who have myriad challenges to make appointments with a complicated system and to make sure that they're clean and sober and so forth. And it puts so much of a burden on the backs of people who are struggling, where I think, if I have five meetings to keep, it's pretty hard work to get there on time to 5 different places. So by putting people with similar challenges together, it's possible for the services to go to them. And that's something that I think will prove in the long run to be very effective. We also have the OHSU glad to cooperate because they're seeing how much ER is costing them. And they are such a wealthy organization. They're able to help us. And so that's just something to think about, is how we get those. We know services are very, very expensive. So what are the workarounds to kind of innovate? And one of the things that tends to innovate is, in Portland, we're spending over $80,000 per person who's on the street. And so what you don't first of all, you don't think of at first is that is $1 million for every 12 people on the street as an industry. And we've got non-governmental organizations that want things to go on exactly as they are because it's their business. And so you are in danger when you change anything of encountering other people who are on your side suddenly working against you. So it's there's clearly the system now does not work. So you're going to wind up stepping on toes if you change it, but it has to change.
Great, thank you, John. Warren, did you still have a question, or did?
I do. This is me. Linda is here, but several things. Mountain West Real Estate has put up 180 housing units on Portland Road with supportive services, wraparound services, which was the critical part. My wife and I have taken numerous times, have taken point in time count and talked to the homeless people to figure out kind of what their story is. And there's as many reasons why people are homeless as there are people out on the streets. One of the things that we saw was there's no housing. There's housing for men, 300 units, right now 150 in the Union Gospel Shelter, and 300 coming up. And there's about 150 or 100 in Wainema, Samanka House for women. But there's no housing whatsoever for cohabitation of men with women. which seems to be a very, very sticky point. And I just want to say thank you, Cindy, for bringing the mental health issue up. That was exactly one of the supportive services, one of the issues that I wanted to talk about. So please address the cohabitation and the NIMBY. Where are you going to put this? The neighborhood associations or homeowners are going to say, I don't think so. Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. So clearly families are one of the huge challenges. So in a big house, can we have multiple families living together? Yes, it's something that they've done in Denmark, where it's been very, very useful, where if you have somewhat functional families, you have this friendship network where they can help each other with childcare. And it also takes some of the stresses, friction off of couples, because they have an outside friend community. They're not isolated with just the family. The idea of mental health, one of the biggest factors of mental health is finding a community. And so again, if you have a group that is already kind of carefully put together on a compatibility and a common issues background, they can help each other. And that's something where expertise, and again, you start with the lightest lift. You have people who are suffering from mental health issues. You start with the easiest ones to reach, put them together, and then that becomes a house where they can help each other with some involvement from that outside community, helping facilitate and educate. I think the big idea of sticking 180 people on Portland Road, that idea is it's really hard if they don't have anything in common. It's again becomes a focus, a concentration of poverty. If you get people who are having trouble making decisions that lead to success, and you concentrate them together, that's where you go if you sell drugs. And that's where you go if you're looking for other unsavory vices. That's a problem.
It looks like Rick Galpo has a question.
John, I appreciate this. I know you're focused on kind of the mechanics of building and making that a smart capital investment and kind of using the market. I was wondering if you also see any policy changes that you've become now more interested in that would reduce the amount of people experiencing homelessness or the causes. So I was wondering, I guess, stepping away from the mechanics and the capital, I was wondering if you saw actually, we should be advocating for this and whatever this is.
Yeah, well, one thing that comes up that's kind of a surprise is in an ultra liberal city like Portland is, we wind up starting with the assumption that the landlord is a bad operator and trying to protect the renters. And naturally, it's hard to be a benevolent landlord where you're charging very little if you're right away, all the advocacy is kind of against you, where you have to, that's something to watch out for as policy shapes, is to keep it really in the middle of the road. And especially, obviously, with politics today, it's just that middle of the road is the only place that works. And so I'm kind of hearing suggestions from the left and the right that are scary in both directions, where it's got to be what stands the reasonable man test in the middle that can make, for example, in one of the houses we have, one person showed up and said, look, I need this dog. It's discrimination if I don't get to have a dog with me. And we weren't really clear on what the law was, but pretty soon we had a house full of dogs, and that house was absolutely trashed. And it was sort of like, well, you don't want to discriminate. Well, that's an example of, okay, there is a distinction between service animals and so on. And then they do have policies that those dogs need to be outside and so on. But it's something where we have to be careful not to legislate away the ability to take care of our fellow man.
Thanks.
I sure remember the name Bednars. That's did you live in the big white house up on High Street?
That I did for many, many years. I've been very involved in the, with Marion Polk Food Share, trying to understand, never been hungry. And so I try to understand, and we've been very involved. My wife here, Linda,
Hi.
is on Community Action Agency Board, and we've never been homeless, and we're trying to understand, and we've put a lot of effort in our community to help figure out some of the solutions.
Just real quick, I don't know if there's other questions, but I've worked in mental health for many years, and I think your focus on the smaller groups with a consistent common theme would be really helpful for people with disabilities, mental health disabilities. Disability is a big handicap in terms of income. People on disability only get $720 a month or something like that, and so that's an area I think that's real important in terms of policies and helping people find affordable housing. Anyway, just putting a plug in for that. I appreciate your approach. It's I think all the nonprofits like Community Action and the entrepreneurs like you need to work together on this solution with all these different approaches.
Oh, and by the way, I thought one of the low-hanging fruits were going to be veterans, which is why I ended up going to the Veterans Administration in Portland, because I knew there was funds already for that group of people who are on the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's.
Well, I work with the Navy and the Marines when they come to town for the Rose Festival every year. So I've had the opportunity to host all these admirals and the Secretary of the Navy and so on. And I thought we would set up as the outside community active duty with vets. And I talked to the Veterans Administration, and they said, you know, you're not ready to handle vets yet. You know, go do some low-hanging fruit time first, and then come back for the vets. Because you know, if I come walking into one of these houses and people are post-traumatic stress disorder, I might have trouble. Might have trouble managing that. So that was the advice of the Veterans Administration.
We just actually had a vet with PTSD just leave our home after 2.5 years.
Well, one of the exciting things in Salem you might be aware of is Community Action is going to be opening a home for veterans in just, I think it may even be opening this month. And it's kind of on that model of being a smaller community for veterans specifically that have been homeless. And they also just opened another community kind of homeless with the hardest to house mental health issues program, apartment complex, kind of a smaller model. And so there's some exciting things happening along this way too.
Yeah, that is great. And you think of a population like that where they've been used to top-down direction. And the idea of what homeless people do not have in common with us is they are less aware of how to use their time efficiently. And so when you have, that's the same with people who are long-term incarcerated. When they come out, they're not sure how to use that time effectively. So putting those communities, you know, those two communities, and that's where I see active military as volunteers for that group being just an ideal. Talking about here's how to organize your day, and it's kind of that idea of giving them some direction.
Thank you for that. Tricia, you had a comment, and then we have or a question. Tricia, sorry everybody, my bandwidth is popping me in and out of the meeting. Tricia, did you have another comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, just real quick. I have questions for you, sir, about youth homelessness and how you have interacted with that population, or thoughts on that. Speaking of youth in terms of minors and also the transitional aged youth, 18 to age 24, so the young adults. And then a second question about how you have included, or you've seen best included, voices of lived experience in this model and their opinions on how it works or doesn't work, and their views.
So first of all, the kind of the young adults group is what the girls who'd aged out of foster care were. And that was really exciting to see how we could put them with, again, women business leaders who could work on a ladder to success for them. And so we had some just surprise fun moments. And also some of the people, we put them together with women from all walks of life to talk to them. So we had an opera star, for example, where they went to meet her when she was singing, and then got to see her in her costume, and then she came and just talked to them about the work that it took and how she got where she was and so on. That was really, really neat. And they all asked questions, and it was very participatory. Another thing that is kind of fascinating is, you know, the one thing we do in Portland is we try to listen first to homeless people to see what their solutions are. And so with one of the neat insights I got, I've met with a guy who was actually had been predatory on young women, and he'd been in trouble so much he just is unemployable, keeps getting into the same recidivism. And so I was telling him about building these houses, and he said, you know, you're a complete failure. I said, well, I'm doing what I can. Why do you say I'm a failure? And he said, well, because you can't do it alone. You need to network with more people. You're trying to do this on your own. That doesn't work. That was one of the greatest insights. Something that we've got in Portland is some very able people working on the problem with occasionally there's a kind of an abandonment. We have Mark Jolie is one of our leaders in Portland on housing, and he was Barack Obama's professor of law. He's a very, very sharp person, and he's been studying homeless challenges for 30 years. So he's just a really smart, effective person. But oftentimes we have these meetings where we're only listening to somebody who represents the most challenged group. And so we'll have, you know, somebody that's clearly not thinking well in order to honor their voice. And that has not been resulting in solutions as much as we like. And so that's kind of a balancing act. You know, we had a guy who'd been living in a thicket for 30 years, and he just didn't know who he was or where he was. And we all quietly listened to him, and we had a room full of really sharp people. And that's part of the balancing act of this issue that's really difficult.
I appreciate those words. There's lots of different toolkits and information out there on how to include voices of lived experience in a deeper way than listening sessions, but embedding them in the process and in the decision making, and also how to support them so their voices aren't negated based on the challenges that they're currently experiencing, but models on how to fully support them so their voices can be heard and considered valid within the decision making process. Thank you for all that you're doing. I think it's fantastic, and I'm excited to get this conversation going down here in Salem.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up with a comment from Laura Tiffin.
John, this is Laura Chandler Tiffin here, and I just want to say thank you.
Laura!
Thank you for representing the South Salem High School class of 1986, and thank you for dedicating your wisdom to such an important cause. It's really good to see you.
Oh, great to see you too, Laura.
That's fun. That's a lovely way to wrap up. Well, John, this was absolutely fascinating, and it appears that you'll be getting a lot of follow-up communications with members of our club. So thank you so much for joining us today and for your truly important work. In honor of you, we'll be making a donation to our very own Salem Rotary Foundation. So thank you again. And
yeah, thank you, Salem. Great to see you.
That's great. So to wrap up our day, first off, next week's program will be Christy Perry and some members of her team, and she'll be providing us a school district bond construction update. And Laura Tiffin will be our program chair next week. And then just want to thank you all. I think the numbers are still coming in, but from what I'm hearing, and we have to add a couple, is we had over 46 bell ringers to honor Selma today. So thank you all for that very much. And then I've received a few emails to say I want to be a part of that honoring Selma as well. So I'll update those that are involved in the bell ringers. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. John, it was wonderful to have you as our guest. Keep up the wonderful work, and looking forward to seeing who the partners are here down in the Salem area in the near future. So with that, we'll wrap up. Everyone take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next Wednesday.
My best to Salem. Thank you.
Bye.